My son popped in the other day and said, "Dad, can you make me a plywood box so I can keep my airsoft rifle in the back of the van?" "Sure," I said, "but a plywood box? I think we can do a little better than that." So this is what I came up with. A plywood box, lipped in hardwood, with two nice hardwood Vieko fascias on them. Room for two guns, naturally, got to have a spare. Fully lockable. And keys that fold back into the fob. Perfect. This is how I made it. With the gun laid out on the bench, it's easier for me to measure to calculate the size that the drawers need to be. So the gun's 740mm long. If I add 10mm to each end, then there's room to take it in and out. So 760mm, and it takes up 290mm, so again 310, and then the height 120. So they're my critical measurements, and with those I can go to Fusion and I can design my box. I'll start with the top and bottom panel of the carcass. I'll lip them both all the way around with the hardwood that I've cut down to size. On the two side panels, I'll only need lipping front and back, and on the back panel, I won't need any lipping at all. I'm going to use 4mm Dominoes to help with the alignment when I'm gluing all the lipping together, and then all I've got to do is concentrate on the miters. Moving on to the drawers, no lipping here, just a basic box. So again, using the 4mm Dominoes, I'll attach left and right hand sides, glue them, then the front and the back, and then once I'm happy that the drawers are good fit in the carcass, I'll cut and fit the hardwood front panel with the handle. Swinging a full sheet of plywood around in the workshop on my own is a bit of a challenge, so I'm going to cut it down to size with a rail saw, and then the more manageable pieces are easy for me to trim to the exact size I want on a table saw. I've decided to use the bandsaw to cut all of the plywood to frame the hardwood in. There's less wastage as it's a far thinner blade. The only downside is after each cut I need to go over to the planer and just clean that edge up again. I need one clean face on every piece so that I can run it through the planer thicknesser afterwards and achieve the desired thickness. With all the hardwood pieces planed down to the thickness that I need, it's exactly the same process again to get the individual strips through the bandsaw, through the planer. Job done. So that's my panels for the carcass cut to size and my hardwood lippings cut to size. But as you can see, I've got a bit of an issue. Now that I've got the strips all cut down to about 13mm, they've all turned into little bananas. Crazy word. So I need to make some kind of jig to allow me to hold these in place and straight while I cut the miters and cut each piece to size. So once again, I'm going to use the Match Fit micro jig system to enable me to do this. So I've taken a bit of waste MDF, cut some dovetail channels in it, and I've put a sacrificial fence on the back. The idea being that I can take my piece of lipping, pop it in the appropriate place, take a false, again sacrificial piece, and I can clamp that, hold it tightly against the back, and then pop one of these in, clamp it in place, and then my fingers are out the way, the piece is held securely in place, nice and straight, nice and firm, and I can make the cut with, I think, relative ease. So I've got a middle mark here, just to allow me to roughly align it. The important part is going to be making sure that this clamp doesn't foul the body when it comes down to make the cut. And what I also want to do is to get the saw to drop about there, I think. So I'm going to lock it horizontal travel in place there, and I'm also going to set the height so that it doesn't cut through this baseboard, and that should about do it. So we'll make a test cut. So that gives me a couple of things. One, it gives me the ability to hold that little wee piece of hardwood in place safely and securely with my fingers well out the way, but it also gives me a perfect spot for alignment when I come to mark the length of the piece and cut the mitre on the other end. So that's fine for cutting the first mitre on the lipping pieces, but the next challenge is how to hold them in place so that I can mark for the exact length. So I've got a couple of these Rutland clamps set up on the bench. They're really quite good. I did a video on them last week. I'll put a link below in the description. So I'm going to effectively clamp them in the place they would be when I glue them up. And I'm using a little bit of offcut here just to make sure I've got that first edge lined up nicely. Then I can clamp that. I've got another clamp at the other end just to hold it tight to the board. And then I've got a flat back marking knife so that I can make sure I get the back of the knife right up tight to the ply and get a good mark on there that I can see when I take it back to the mitre saw. And I'm also going to put a little pencil mark on it so I don't make the schoolboy error and cut the mitre the wrong way. And cutting this end's a little tricky because of the bend in the piece, and it flexes every time you clamp it back. So I'm just going to sneak up on it to make sure I don't undercut. And I'm happy with that. Okay, so the cutting method's fine. And I think because these pieces are so badly bent and twisted, I'm going to have to cut a piece and glue it and work my way around the panel one piece at a time. In which case, I now need to cut the dominoes in this piece. So I'm going to come in 50 mil. And then I think I'm going to put a domino in every 150. So I'll square those back, and then we'll look at how we're going to cut the dominoes in these tiddly little bits. So cutting the dominoes again presents a set of problems. I need to be able to hold this straight and flat again, but the only piece I'm really interested in is that bit, because that's where the domino's going to rest. So I've got a straight piece of board clamped to the bench, and then I've got a little fence that's set just a shade under 12 mil back from the front so that it doesn't foul the faceplate on the domino. And then I can use these toggle clamps just to keep it in place while I cut that mortise, these being really easy to just pop out the way. And now for the dry fit. That looks pretty good. I'm more than happy with that. But it does mean I'm going to have to glue one piece on at a time. So the glue up went quite well. That's not too bad either. Each one of those little hurdles wasn't too bad, but when you put the three together, it's going to make a quite a drawn out and arduous process to get each panel lipped. So I'll get that done and I'll see you on the other side ready for assembly. I mentioned earlier in the video that I'd cut the hardwood lipping to 13mm, and that was on purpose so that I could trim it back to match exactly the size of the ply. Now, whilst I could have used a palm router on the edge, it's much easier to use this. I'm lucky enough to own this Festool laminate trimmer, this lovely big flat plate. Place it down on the surface that you want to trim to and merely pull along and you get a perfect finish. For the carcass assembly, again, Dominoes to help with alignment. So I'm going to come in 50mm from each end. And then one dead center. So I've decided to do the glue up in two parts. The sides to the back first, and then the top and bottom to that assembly afterwards. That way I've got far less to worry about and far less chance of getting it all wrong. Bessie, Rutlands and well cut all working together and no arguments. So my cabinet's out the clamps and I've given it a light sand. Was that convincing? No, I didn't think so. I used the electric one. Anyway, I'm going to set the cabinet to one side now and start on the drawers. So again, as I'm using the Domino, I need to reference off the outside face to make sure they align, and any indiscrepancies on plywood thickness is completely avoided because it'll be to the inside. I'm going to do the drawer glue up in 2 stages as well, just so I can make sure everything remains square. So I've taken the drawers out of the clamps and given them both a light sand. My next job is to fit the drawer runners. So I'm going to fit the drawer runner so that it's flush with the bottom of the drawer, and then I'll make the allowance underneath the cabinet side of the runner to raise the drawer up off the bottom so it doesn't catch. Now these brackets are 46mm, so I'm going to strike a line at 23. And then using a bit of scrap, I can keep that runner flush with the front. And mark for my holes. For the runners inside the carcass, I'm going to use these 2mm packers to raise the runner off the base, which will give me my allowance to allow the drawer to run free. And then I'm going to line the front up with the inside of the hardwood lipping, and again mark my holes. And exactly the same for the other side. And if all has gone to plan, we'll have a drawer that slides in beautifully. Top drawer is slightly more awkward, so I don't have a nice base to sit on. So I'm going to strike a line off the top of the bottom drawer and then measure up to drill my holes for the drawer runner. So if I go 25mm off of that mark, one and two. Now that I've got my drawers in, I can fit the hardwood face panel. So I've got a panel that I've made up out of some more Vieko, and I've got a clean edge on the bottom and a 90-degree cut on the right hand side, so that I can start from that side, cut this end to fit the opening, and then trim the top down to fit the opening. And what I want to do is to end up with a 2mm gap all the way around and between the drawers. So because I'm going to take another 2mm off, I'm quite happy to just do this side via measurement. Well, that's not a bad fit at all. So I'm going to take 4mm off of one side, which will achieve my 2mm gap either end. So to cut the panel to height, I've put a middle mark on each side, so I can cut the bottom half to exactly the height I want it to be, which will leave me just a little bit of room left to be able to trim the top panel to suit with the 2mm gap up above. So with the top drawer out the way, I can use my clamps to keep the drawer face in the perfect place while I screw it in place from the back. And to hold this top panel in place, I'm going to use the old super glue tape and accelerator trick. Hopefully I can get it in the right place before she touches. Looking good. Now the last job before I can apply the finish is to fit a lock. Now I've picked these locks up off of Amazon, just a standard cabinet lock that I'm thinking I can place right in the middle. So the bottom drawer, because of the depth of it, is going to have to lock into the top drawer. I could turn that the other way up and pop it down the bottom, I suppose. I'm not sure I like the fact that one will be at the bottom and one will be at the top. I think I'd prefer the look. And I think my son's going to prefer it if it's there. So to work out where I need to drill the hole, I'm going to strike a line dead center of the drawer on both of them, and then I'll measure down distance from the top to center line of the lock. I'll drill the hole first, and then I can pop the lock through the back of the drawer and work out where I need to put the slot to in the bottom of the top drawer for the lock to locate. This lock shaft is actually, is actually just a bit too narrow to span the drawer. So I'm going to have to either leave it recessed, or I'm going to have to recess that back plate into the plywood a little bit. And I think that's going to look a little bit better if I recess the back plate in just a snads. 402 will give me dead center. So I'm going to have to sink that back in by 5mm. Unfortunately, that bit there is going to have to come out as well because it fouls the catch. Lovely. So I'll not screw those in yet. First, I'll give everything 2 coats of polyvine, and then I can screw the latches in place. I just realised in my enthusiasm to get the finish on, I forgot to cut the slot for the cabinet locks. I need to cut a slot in the bottom of the top drawer at 22mm back. So to cut this little slot, I've got my smallest router bit set up in my DeWalt palm router. It's a 6mm bit, so it's slightly oversized. So I've aligned the front of the bit to the front of the slot so that the overcut's at the back and therefore won't matter. So finally, instead of trying to scribe some wood to support the gun, I've gone with the slightly more flexible and, you could argue, easier approach of some self-adhesive neoprene to act as cushioning for the gun, and some Velcro strips to keep the gun held firmly in place. And that, as they say, is that. And that's it. 217 short and easy to follow steps so that you too can make your very own travel safe airsoft rifle gun case. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Ta-ra.